Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Echo Leadership Podcast with Andy Wood. My name is David Hybisky and I'm privileged to be here with Andy Wood today having a conversation on leadership. And Andy, it's episode 5.
Episode 5, baby.
Episode 5. This is going to be a great one.
I'm glad you're back. By popular demand, bro.
Thanks, man.
I think it's the head. Everybody, the shiny head.
It's
For those of you who are listening and you can't see, David he's not a skinhead, but he has a shaved head.
There is hair. We shave it. But hey, let's talk about leadership, not my hair. Here we go. All right. So a lot of times in leadership, I think we get to these places when we lead where we can feel stuck.
Right.
You can feel it, or you can actually get stuck in your leadership somewhere. And I think one of the big questions that we have is like, how do we get through that? And so I know a lot of times we get questions on this. How do I break barriers, growth barriers? I feel capped. So Andy, we want to have a conversation around this. So tell us just a little bit about how you get unstuck.
Well, I think also one way to frame this is that for us right now, we're still stuck in so many different ways in our lives. You know, we live in California. Our church can't at this point meet physically. Everything's online. So the organization that we started, that was one way. We had to pivot. We're in this like in-between zone. How long is this going to be? So we feel stuck there. And then, you know, for a lot of us, things that we normally do in life, we can't do. So we feel stuck at home. And it's easy in a season like right now to feel stuck. But generally speaking, there are things in our lives that we want to change. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's, you know, personal. You want to lose weight, or maybe there's a project that you wanted to do around your house. I know like last year you built a shed out back. And sometimes you'll see things like that you want to do for a really long period of time. And the longer you wait on a dream or a vision or a plan that's there, or something that you really want to change, it almost seems like that begins to weigh heavier on you the longer you sit there on it. And it's not that you can do everything at once. And one of my big challenges is taking on way too many things at one time to change. But I think that there's a general framework of how you can get yourself unstuck. I kind of fell into something. So last month I had an appointment, and it was basically I work with a coach who walks through different areas with me, and I had an appointment with him, and the appointment basically was scheduled, and the guy had to cancel. So I had the hour there, and I'm like, well, why don't I just coach myself? You know, I have an hour in my schedule. Why don't I take the time to actually do the thing that I was thinking I would do, or work on the thing I wanted to work on? So I took the whole hour, and I got way more done in the hour by myself than I did with a coach. Now, actually, that guy doesn't coach me anymore. After I did it myself, I was like, well, if I'm paying somebody, they probably should actually be helping me more than I can help myself. But one of the things that a great coach does is a great coach asks great questions. So I began to think, what if I could flip that same concept on its head and be the one asking myself great questions? So I love to, get in rooms and ask people. I do this with our team all the time. We're always asking questions. That's how we learn. That's how we grow. But what if you flip it on yourself? So one of the key things I think is that you got to have the space or the margin in your schedule to coach yourself. So what I would like to encourage you to think about as a leader is take 1 hour over a 1 month period of time. So we release this podcast every month, beginning of the month. What if you took 1 hour and set aside that 1 hour to coach yourself, and let's see how much we can get done in 1 hour. So I'm going to give you some kind of thinking tools that will help you coach yourself.
That's really good. And I think when you said this, like coaches, when somebody's coaching themselves, it's really, the coach is not necessarily telling you what to do.
Right.
So sometimes like a mentor you might go to and you're like, can you just tell me what to do?
Correct.
When you go to a coach, you really want them to help guide you. They're like the guide. They're asking you the questions, they're helping you self-discover, right? So in some ways, you've got to get good at asking the right questions.
Yeah, I think that brings up a really good point. There is a difference between a coach, a consultant, a mentor. Mm-hmm. I think of a consultant or a mentor much more. They have an expertise. You're going to them with a narrow lane. You're asking them a very specific question, and they're giving you, based upon massive amounts of wisdom, a distilled plan of action or some principles. But they're really prescribing for you like a doctor would. Here's a way you can move forward.
Which kind of helps people, because I think sometimes when we feel stuck, we get into a situation, we think, I don't know what to do.
Right.
So how do I get myself out of it? But to coach yourself, you don't have to have the answer.
Right.
You just have to be good at asking your own self questions.
Yes, exactly.
Right? So everybody can do this no matter where they feel that they're at.
Yeah, you can do that. You could take this principle and tool that we're about to share with you, you could use it in your family.
Mm-hmm.
You could use it in your career. You could use it for a project. I use this paradigm for a project I wanted to get accomplished at my house. So there's a lot of different applications of how you can get yourself unstuck.
That's awesome. Well, let's jump into it, man. So what is the name of this tool?
It's a great name. It's the whoop method.
The whoop method. So there you go. So if you can't remember the whoop method after this podcast.
It's not whoop. It's whoop like that.
And not from Texas A&M, right?
Yes, exactly.
They'll do the little whoop thing there. So whoop, we're assuming that stands for something.
Yes,
so can
it's
you
an
tell us that?
acronym. It's an acronym for wish, obstacles, overcome, and plan. So there's 4 aspects. And so if you took an hour, you could walk through what we're about to share with you.
All right. So the first one you said is wish. So let's talk a little bit about that. Like what is the wish as part of this tool?
Yeah, there are a couple different ways to think about this. One is like if you could wave a magic wand over your life, what's 1 or 2 things that you'd like to see get accomplished, or 1 to 2 things that you'd like to change. So the more narrow, the more specific it is, the easier it is to make progress. So my biggest challenge is I try to get too much done in too short of a period of time. So if I'm
sure nobody else can relate to that at all. I'm just kidding. Like I'm a glutton for that punishment there as well.
We all have a tendency to okay, I'm going to take on a lot, and it doesn't always go well for me. So one thing you'd love to change or accomplish, and give yourself maybe a quarter, 2 or 3 months to get something accomplished. And I'll give you the example. I wanted to build a bookshelf in my house, was like a kind of designed bookshelf,
which people need to know. For you to do manual labor, like building something, that's
right.
That's a big deal. Like y'all may not understand this.
I know that there's a comedy to me building a bookshelf, but now I do have a bookshelf.
You do. You did a great job.
And so I got in mind. Okay, I want to. I walked through my room, the office where it was, and it started speaking to me, not audibly, but with an internal impression. And the voice was like, "I want to be an office. I want to have a bookshelf on me." The wall said. So then I narrowed it down. And for the longest time, another example was like launching a leadership podcast. So getting the more and more specific you can make it, the easier it's going to be to make progress. So I would just encourage people, like pick an area personally, or pick an area with your profession, with your job. Maybe it might be something along the lines of, I want to improve the quality of the team that I work on, or I want to get better at managing people. I want to, for a period of time, really hone in on that. But the more narrow it is, the easier it's going to be to make traction.
Let me ask you this. So would you recommend, because like you said, we often take on too much.
Right.
Every person right now listening is thinking through, like you just said, home, my physical fitness, my leadership, my finances, whatever. Like we're all thinking through this. When you do this, do you take one area across or do you kind of like pick one thing per kind of category, if you will, of your life?
Yeah, I think of it, maybe I said this last week about roadblocks and rockets. I got that originally from Larry Osborne, that there oftentimes are really big roadblocks that are in the way of forward progress. So I try to think of like something that I've wanted to do that if I got it done, I would feel really good about. Like it would really lift the lid for me. So here's another example. Since COVID, we had 2 cars at the front end of COVID. I got rid of one right when COVID started. And then now as things started opening up again, we only have 1 car. And Stacy and I are getting in back and forth about who gets the car, when. And it worked for a while when nobody was leaving, but now we're leaving half the time. It's a problem. So I just had to narrow in, okay, by the end of the month, I need to get a car. And it seems complicated, but for me, I'm just like, I got to. So if it's something that is really holding you back, and there would be a tremendous amount of relief if you got it off your plate, you'd feel better. To me, that's the kind of category of things. Now, stuff like losing weight and, quality stuff, improving a team, all that's great too. But you might want to start with something that's more like, okay, a project that you can accomplish.
Like a shorter term, take the pressure off. But then you might also plan like in 30 years, I want to be healthy when I retire.
30 years, yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
that's the physical health. That's another one. So, all right. So we got our wish, the one thing that we want to try and accomplish. We're going to try and refine that down as focused as possible with what's going to help us move forward.
Yeah.
And then what's the next step we need to take?
Okay, so the second is the O. It's the first of the two O's. It's obstacles. So at this point, I want to ask, what are the biggest challenges that surround that thing? So in doing this, I'm wrestling through, why haven't I already done the thing that I want to do? So right now, I'm working on. I'm going to publish my first book. I've determined, even if it costs me a finger, I'm gonna publish my first book by the time I'm 40. So I just, in my mind, I'm like, I'm gonna get it out there.
And everybody's question right now is how far is that?
Oh, I thought you
or
were
which
saying
finger?
which finger? It's gonna be
Some
my
people are
middle
which
finger.
finger. Some people, it all depends on how much credit they're giving you right now.
Yeah.
So
So I wrestled through, why haven't I written a book yet?
Yeah.
So number one, like I actually just did this. This was part of my coaching. I don't have a plan. So I feel like I need to know how to go about it. I don't have a publisher. I feel like I don't have enough time. When I started this conversation back, 6 weeks ago, or 2 months ago, I had never written before. So I'm like, well, I can't write. I just speak. I'm not going to be able to write a book because I've never written before. So I just I started unpacking all those things. And what you start to see is when you put them on paper, you begin to realize that a lot of those things are actually excuses for why you aren't doing the thing that you know you want to do.
Do you think when you think about this, like, they're excuses, but do you break it down at all into, this is a real obstacle? Like, because some obstacles there's really a stand in your face obstacle that you got to come up, but some may be like perceived obstacles.
Right. Yep. Yeah.
Does that help you at all to try and differentiate those two?
Yeah, like one of the perceived obstacles is that I wouldn't know how to sell a book, right? So like, I might not yet know how to sell books, but there's a lot of things in my life I figured out that I didn't know before I did them. So I have to like kind of loop my thinking back to figure out the origination of my stupidity, and then kind of rebuild software around, okay, I can trick my thinking with new software that I put in there.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good. So when you come into this, you see people, oftentimes we have obstacles. They're there. We can identify them. But why is it we still feel stuck sometimes when we get there? Like, what's the why sometimes that we start to hit?
So part of it is like an obstacle. Number one, you don't know how big it is. Sometimes you don't feel like you know how to get over the obstacle. The longer you stare at the obstacle, the bigger the obstacle looks. So it's kind of like when you do a Spartan race or, these big beast runs where there's like a 10-foot wall. The longer you look at the wall, the bigger the wall is.
Yeah.
So that kind of leads us into the second of the O's, which is to overcome.
Can I ask you one thing
Yes.
before that? Because I know for like our leaders, like some are going to be like, yeah, I just want to get to the plan and the back end, and they're going to want to skip this part. How long do you typically try to camp here?
Yeah, I would want to know, like, what are my big 4 reasons for not doing it yet? Like, I wouldn't spend a massive amount of time. Some of it is just figuring out, how can I change that obstacle?
Yeah.
How can I transform that obstacle?
Because if for those of you who maybe don't know Andy, you're kind of one of those people who's like, you're ready to move, you're ready to go.
Yeah.
So you're not going to want to stay here forever. But some people listening might stay here too long.
Yes.
So what would you say for them is like how to move past that, like to get moving?
Yeah. I think the more you can break down, for example, if I haven't had a plan, what are the different components of a plan that I would need to feel good about moving forward? Well, I would need to know that I had to have a publisher. I would need to know that I have to have a book proposal. I would need to know, and then like trying to break it down into the elements that I could eventually take action. You can feel it just in the way I'm talking about it. I naturally just want to get
to go.
I want to,
because I think the important thing is you're in this phase. You're not trying to get all the answers.
No.
You're just identifying the obstacles, because that leads us to, like you said, the second.
Yeah, I'm trying to get dislodged. So I'm trying to get enough clarity around what are the big issues so that I can dislodge the boulder. So the longer I think about why the boulder's there, the less likely I am to lift the boulder. So if I'm giving all my energy to all the reasons why this thing's here, it's not going to help me move the thing that's there.
Yeah.
So I need enough to get myself to 5 to 10 strategic, actionable items that I can take on with the obstacle that's in front of me.
Absolutely. And that's where we come into the second of the O's, which you said, which is overcome.
Yes.
So how do we overcome this?
When you take an obstacle, every obstacle can be transformed. So every obstacle potent within that is an opportunity. I don't know a publisher yet, but I had a conversation with a publisher today that could one day, or an agent today, that one day could be a relationship long-term that helps me get multiple books promoted. I don't know an agent, but I do have a friend who's published 3 books. I don't know how to write, but I could do a 40-day journal for our church and test my skills of writing. So I'm trying to say, within this obstacle, how can I change it to see it more opportunistically to then begin to overcome the thing that stands between me and what I know I already want to do?
So at this phase, it's almost like you're getting into a brainstorm phase.
Yes.
Like sometimes we've said this in like creative meetings, it's like the blue sky, like open up, the sky's the limit. Like let's get ideas. Don't shoot them down. Don't make excuses for them. We're just making a list of possible ways to overcome the obstacles.
Yeah. And I think one aspect of this that's super important, if you're a perfectionist, this will be really hard. If you're trying to come up with the perfect plan, it's really hard to move forward on a vision. So I want a good plan. Like a good plan, well executed, is way better than a perfect plan in theory. And a lot of people want to get that perfect plan and put it in a drawer. I want to get a good plan and get moving on stuff.
Yeah. Because the action is ultimately what you're after.
That's what's going to
You're after the fruit that's going to come from the actions.
Yes.
So we've got the wish. We've determined what we want. We've got our list of big obstacles, like the big rocks keeping us from it.
Let me say one more thing on the obstacle side of things. When you're trying to overcome it, I would just say if you got 4 obstacles, and each obstacle you said, how can I turn this obstacle into an opportunity? Just one way to turn it into an opportunity will give you some really clear...
there's a way right there too, and you're shifting your thinking. It's really a mindset. So if I think about, like, if you're doing this with a team, you're going to have somebody in your team who's going to be the but person. Yeah, but. They're going to be like, yeah, but.
I always like how people say, I want to be the devil's advocate. It's
true.
He does not need another advocate.
So right now, if you're listening to this with your team and you're saying, I want to be the devil's advocate on this, just know, maybe not look at everybody else right now, right? Like that's the
point. At the devil's advocate.
Yeah. So because we're going to have somebody who says, but I think the important side of what you're saying in this is we're shifting the way that we think about the obstacle.
Yes.
We're seeing it now in light of it creates an opportunity.
Yeah, and we're not at all saying that the obstacle's not real.
Yeah, it's there.
Yeah, it exists, but I refuse to accept the obstacle as a reason that I can't do the thing that I want or God wants me to do. It's just some of this is back to like the whole Enneagram stuff we've talked about before. I'm an 8, and the worst thing you can say to an 8 is you can't.
So true.
If you want to motivate an 8, say you can't.
Yeah. So maybe for some of our listeners, even some of them are in that same boat.
Yeah.
Some of them just need to hear that. Like change the way that you see an obstacle. Change the way that you think about it. Even in our meetings and our teams, change the way that you talk about it.
Yes.
Because all of these things really do impact how we are going to approach this. Right?
Yeah.
Like an optimistic, faith-filled, we got this, we can take this, we're going to move forward is really going to help us move.
Yeah. And some of the greatest solutions you'll come up with is just out of that transformation of your thinking.
Absolutely. So then we come up with ways to overcome. Now, what's the last step of the tool?
Yeah, so this is where the rubber meets the road. It's the plan. And it's what are, real simple question, what are 5 actions I could take to move this forward? So like within the next week or 2 weeks or whatever period of time that you set to say, I'm going to do 5 things that I can to move this vision forward. So for example, on the book, right? I'm really hot on this right now.
I can't tell. Tell me some more about it.
So I talked to a mentor about it. I have a board, we have a board member. I talked to a publisher. I talked to an agent, and I just put in my calendar or on my task list, I'm going to do these things, and I'm going to leverage my network, and I'm going to do it by the end of August. So I want to do everything I can by the end of August on these actionable items. And that simple, clear, I might get told no. I've had conversations where I threw my pitch out there. It didn't go as well. I refined my pitch. Next time I got on the call with somebody, I knew a better question to ask. And I was like, okay, my pitch is better this time because the person thought about it and they're like, oh, that's good. So I'm learning as I'm going, but I'm not going to allow those things that stand as obstacles to prevent me from actually taking the actionable items. So
that's really good. So in your plan, then, how do you
hold yourself accountable?
Yeah, because I think a lot of people, right? Maybe maybe not everybody's like me. Sometimes I get a plan, I get down to it, I'm like, cool, these are my things, and then I get off track, I get off focus. Like, how are you keeping yourself focused to actually execute the plan that you've just coached yourself to do?
Deadlines really help me. So I want to do it by this date. Artificial deadline. So for example, the whole Hope Project thing, I wrote a 40-day, it ended up being the length of a 40,000, it was 40,000 words, length of a nonfiction book. I just made a commitment, and I felt prompted by God to do it, which helps. That really does help. When you feel like if you don't do this, you're disobeying God. That's, for me, that always really does motivate me. But in that particular instance, there was a deadline by June 1st. It had to be done. If it wasn't, we couldn't get it edited. We couldn't get it formatted. So that in that case, it was a real deadline. That motivates me to back myself up. And I may crunch to the last minute. I may even be a day or two late on it, but that deadline really does help. The other thing is I think in buckets. So I will plan my week in buckets. So like one of my other things I want to do this year is some real estate type stuff, invest in real estate. And so I have a time in my calendar on Friday that I work on it, whether it's reading book or reading blogs or talking to people about real estate. All that time chunk is there. So I'm moving forward on a project. So I want to do something in real estate by the end of the year.
There you
go. So that commitment, pushing into my calendar, makes me move it forward on a weekly basis.
Do you ever feel yourself like getting unmotivated even though you have the deadline?
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of times where I'll set time on my calendar and I just don't want to do the thing that I said.
So when you do that, that's like when you get up and you're like, I just don't want to work out today.
Yeah.
So like, how do you keep yourself motivated in that?
I try to trick myself. So like,
I feel like we should do a podcast called Mind Games with Andy Wood.
I try to eliminate the decision. So
what do you mean by that?
Well, it's a lot easier for me to work out if my clothes are set out. So most nights I set my clothes out. It was funny this morning. I actually didn't work out because I did a bunch of recordings early. But I actually had my workout clothes on and took my workout clothes off. But it is a habit. Yeah. Every night I set my workout clothes out. First thing when I get up, when I'm making my coffee, I put my workout clothes on. It's one less decision I have to make. And I just find that if I don't do that, it's a lot harder for me. So I trick myself by saying, okay, I'm gonna, Friday at this time, I'm gonna do da 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 da. Oftentimes I'll tell Stacy, I'll say, hey babe, I'm doing this. If I feel really tempted, I try to keep as consistent of a time that I go to bed and wake up as possible, because that helps. It's like a treadmill that kind of keeps me rolling. But I have times where I hit waves. If I find that if I am not feeling motivated, something's not right for me personally. And usually it's a sign to me, it's symptomatic of, well, I either A, am not getting enough rest, B, I'm not working on the right thing, or C, I have some faulty paradigm in my mind of why my contribution's not making a difference. So with that being said, instead of going back and saying my plan is wrong, I whoop the wrong thing. Yeah.
Now it might be there's another thing that's keeping you from getting your plan done.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you got to look at.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of like really practical instances. Like when I wrote the 40-day Hope Project, I wrote it in about a 3-week period of time. And there were a number of times that I scheduled to write and I didn't write.
Yeah.
And for me, in those moments, I honestly, having Stacy be my accountability partner, and you can't always have your spouse be your accountability partner, but
It's probably not the best marriage advice.
yeah, but she's really good at she has a little phrase, knees or buns. Knees or buns, that means you can sit on your knees or buns. I think she got it from another author, but you got to write. And so I just took her words and it'd be knees or buns. So the other thing my dad used to say to me when I was a kid, and I say to myself, when I don't want to do something, as a kid, I would say to my dad, I don't want to do it. And my dad used to say to me, literally, David, and I don't know if this is I need therapy over it or if it's helpful, but the phrase is, my dad would say, you don't have to want to do it to do it. And so I just say, I don't have to want to do it to do it. And that, for me, it's like, this is not a matter of something I need to want to do it.
Yeah.
And that helps me stay on track. But I have bad days. My biggest thing is when I'm tired and I'm not motivated, I waste time.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll spend too much time on email, or I'll, do stuff on social media, and I'm wasting time. So I have to come back to prioritizing buckets of time, big things I want to get accomplished every week, and then look at it from a project base where I set deadlines and I want to get it done by a certain day.
It's really good. So I think the important thing for everybody, you can walk away from it, go, I got a plan. I'm putting in deadlines. I'm maybe going to tell somebody. And then I love one thing that you said is you have these phrases that are coming back that are driving you. Even when I don't feel like doing it, I don't have to want to
You don't have to want to do it to do it.
But you got these phrases that they keep you moving.
Yeah.
And these things that you've done. And I think that's a great way for us to keep moving.
Yeah. The other thing that happens to me is I get discouraged a lot. So I'll have really high expectations, and that will demotivate me because I'll be like, oh, it's taking way too long. You're not making nearly as much progress. And one of my little phrases is anybody who gets anything accomplished deals with the exact same thing you're dealing with right now. And for me, I'm like, oh, this is a part of the process. Anybody who wants to make progress on writing a book at some point has to figure out publishing, an agent, and there's no way around it.
Absolutely.
And so you just got to go through it. So
part of coaching yourself is coaching yourself even after you've done
coached
the work.
yourself. Yeah.
And which part of it, I think, for the great thing, again, for us to come back to in the very beginning, all of those who are listening today, you can do this.
Right.
Because you don't have to have all the answers. Coaching yourself is asking yourself questions, understanding, I love what you said, what you're feeling, what's my area I'm stuck, what's my obstacle, and I'm asking all the questions to help devise a plan to conquer it.
That's good.
So
one thing I would like to drill into in our next episode is coaching yourself has a lot of multifaceted elements to it. One of the elements to it is decision making. So we've talked about implementation and execution. Yeah. Another side is when you have a really big decision that you have to make and you don't know what the right plan of action is, where you can get advice and we need to do that, but you can also coach yourself through a decision. So I'd like to come back next month if you're cool with it and talk through that.
Well, one of the questions that came up was how do I make better decisions and make them faster? And so this is going to be great. Next month, we can't wait to talk to you about how to make decisions. It's going to be a great podcast. Everybody, thank you so much for listening and joining in with us for episode 5 today of the Echo Leadership Podcast with Andy Wood. Hey, if this podcast episode has been helpful, we would love to invite you to like it, share it, even watch this with your team, and then be sure to let us know how you're applying this. So if you're doing this as a team, if you are coaching yourself and using the Whoop, let us know how it's going for you, and even let us know your questions, because we'd love to be able to address those.
Absolutely. We'll take them next month. Thank you so much for joining us today. Have a great day.